Ao passar pelo ribeiro, fitou-me alguém corpo inteiro.
Hola, estamos encantados de estar aquí con vosotros en la Festival de FACYL. Muchas gracias para la invitación. Vamos a seguir en inglés. So Sue, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Siobhan Davies, but everybody, including Annie, will call me Sue. I am a choreographer, a performer, and at the moment the artistic director of Siobhan Davies Studios, based in London. Over to you, Annie.
I am an independent choreographer, performer, I'm also a teacher, and I'm a trained biodynamic craniosacral therapist.
And my question is, where are you now?
So, where am I now? So geographically, Sue, as you know, I'm actually only about 20 minutes walk from you down the road in North London. But I think you're the borough of Camden and I'm the borough of Islington. But I know when you ask a question like that, you don't just mean geographically. So where am I at right now? I'm in a huge moment of transitioning, moving, literally from countries. So I've just been in Spain for a long time and recently come back, and we're in a process of adapting the house for Uma, my 15-month-year-old, dealing with the cultural shock more than usual because of the added ingredient of COVID, and just dealing with the cultural differences of how people are coping with the measures and the restrictions and the protocols. So everything's amplified more than usual. So that's where I'm at, scattered.
Yeah.
And you, where are you?
Well, 20 minutes away from you.
Yeah.
I am also at a cusp of life. A few days ago, I turned 70, which is not all bad. But one of the delicious things that balance that is I'm a grandmother. And I'm the grandmother of a 14-month-old little girl. And there is something about the lifeline between her emerging into the world and me not leaving it by any means, but having a quite different relationship to it. So I see her from day one physically become the little person that she's becoming. And she's doing it so much through movement and touch and sensation. And I, as I am older, have had a life in dance which I always want to be reminded that it is movement, touch, sensation, partnership, relationship that has helped make me. And so my little granddaughter reminds me how I have been made and how my body, mind work as one.
Yes, and we've had many conversations about that compared
Yes.
to Uma and May, haven't we, Sue? So the title of our conversation that we put forward is Dismantling Legacy, which is a big title we are aware of. But this is framed by the fact that you, Sue, are stepping down as artistic director of almost 15 years of much loved London-based dance organisation Siobhan Davies Studios in April next year. And I want to ask you, what do you feel you're letting go of by stepping down and why? And this, of course, implies the future for yourself and of the sector itself.
Great question. I also should point out to people watching this is that you are one of the co-directors taking over that studio, which I am truly delighted by. Stepping down. Down feels sometimes a little bit heavy. I think I'm stepping across, maybe into becoming an artist, just simply dealing with my own work rather than a lot of other people's. The studio has been a fabulous platform, first of all for me, for a dance artist made in England, trained in England. And we were later to the table of contemporary dance than many other countries. And I hope that throughout my 50 years of working within dance, I have witnessed its constant change and its constant growth. So there was a period of time in which I could genuinely say I've been honed by what was going on around me, by what other dancers were doing, what other arts were doing. And I tried to answer the questions that might have been given me as a dancer, or given me as an artist in general, or as a woman in the world. And I tried my best to be curious about those questions and to handle them in some way. What I realized over a period of time is that so many new questions are arriving. The situations are different. And I witness a generation of artists whom I admire so hugely that I think it is very much their turn and their right to be as animate as they possibly can in this world right now. And therefore, by stepping aside, I hope and will them to take on the studios with all of the heft of what they know. And they know a huge amount. And I want them to have the chance, and for you to be there to embrace that chance for them and to help them do that and to help you do that. You asked another bit of the question and I've already forgotten it.
No, you've answered it. It was about letting go, but also the why and how that serves the future of the sector. And you have.
Yes, letting go is, in no way do I want to appear passive in this. In no way do I want to appear as if I am, it feels such a positive move. So I want letting go to be felt as airy and light. I want stepping aside to be felt as full of possibility for me as for anybody else. So energy is in the air. That's what I want.
Okay. Hopefully we will bring some.
So why did you want to step into a situation which is perceived as white? It's perceived as made on white principles, which it, in many ways has. And why would you want to take that on? And how will you imagine the future or make the future in your terms so that you recognize this building in your way?
Well, you might have to remind me of those different segments of the question, but
yes.
I very, very, very nearly didn't go for the role. And it's important to talk about the fact that I didn't go for it alone, and that I partnered with Kat Bridge, a fantastic woman that I've known for a long time, that works within the dance sector. And we were both really strained at the time that the application came out. But what motivated us was that it really felt like this could be a project that we poured a lot of inquiry and discontent and energy into. And for me, it also came at a time where I could have done the opposite and gone into a cave with my little daughter and just watch her move and move with her. But there was something about what's happening in the world at the moment and the topics that are being talked about. I felt that actually I could maybe just give it another push to be seen and to do something that I really want to do and that I feel is needed. Not that I know everything about what is needed, and that's the point. So I think already the fact that the organisation was welcoming applications that wasn't about a singular artistic director, and the fact that Kat and I were appointed together is already marking a very different kind of way forward. It offers a different kind of structuring. We'll both be part-time. We're both mothers, and we're both continuing with our respective practices, me as an artist and Kat as a producer and curator. And I think that's a really great marker of what's changing in the sector as well. And then in terms of what kind of organisation do I want to see being created during our time there, Kat and I really have been talking a lot about what needs to change very quickly. And we've been very honest about that in all our chats with you all and other artists we spoke to about the whiteness of the organisation needing to change both within the staff and in the board. And the board itself is also a structure that can be very questioned in terms of hierarchical norms. So we will be working slowly but hopefully radically to make these shifts happen. And maybe in the time that we're there, what we just start to do is open a door. But that's still worth it, I think, slow as long as it's deep. So me taking over the artistic directorship, there is a question of legacy. And we've entitled this conversation Dismantling Legacy. So, and it arose from us talking about what's not useful about the word legacy or the idea of legacy, or how that is perceived at the moment. And we related this to our practices, didn't we? And so would you like to talk a little bit about that, Sue, around change and legacy, not as a fixed, stayed, permanent? You don't want a statue of yourself in the building, do you?
No. I'm going to hark back a little bit to the answer that you've just given, because in some ways I'd like you to elaborate a bit more. I don't want... no, hold on. What would you be inheriting? And therefore, how I frame my legacy is going to be incredibly important, because I don't want you to inherit something that is not wise for the future. Therefore, you must come in and challenge the whiteness and the build-up of that over a period of time, not always, not intentionally, but there. So in saying that, I already understand that a whole amount needs to be unpicked, has to be unpicked, and therefore the structure and the patterns of the organisation need to be disassembled in ways that make the future useful. So I embrace the fact that you are going to go into a process of change and a process of reassessment and a process of being very future looking with many artists. I am also trying not to forget the many people that helped and supported me in the past become who I am and become what the organisation has become as a welcoming four walls. And that is possibly part of my legacy, is how do we keep as much open as we can. And the reason I can say that is because dance and movement, I can genuinely say, have been my educators. They are my knowledge generators. And the more I listen and learn through how other bodies in the room are learning through the feedback of information being shared amongst us all, Dance is movement and change. Therefore, there is no reason why we should ever think of it being freeze-framed in a particular moment in time. So the last thing I would want would be the studio or the work that all of us have done, not just I, to be freeze-framed and put into an archive and sit there with no animation. So who can animate it? And can it be animated not always by agreeing with it, but by challenging it? And can it be animated can it be animated in a useful way that it is allowed to be compost for future nutrients, really?
Can I pick up on something you said there, Sue, about welcoming and a place that is welcoming? And that's also in other conversations we've had, you've talked about now with increasing awareness of what is needed and what isn't being served, realizing what wasn't welcoming also, and seeing this time as an opportunity to address some of the people that might have felt excluded at certain points, not only from the building, from much bigger structures that are governments, and I think this thing about seeing legacy as something that shapeshifts and that is impermanent and that adapts. And I feel very much, because in that question of why did I want to even apply for a role within an organization that has so much reputation and whiteness and possible exclusivity intellectually around that kind of thinking and practice. There's a lot of somatic investigations that has come under question for that exclusivity. And there is something about what is it that continues? Because I don't just want to go in and rubbish it all and create something new. Something that attracted us to come to you. And there is something, having worked with you as well, a while ago now, but having worked with you, that there is something very uncompromising and very willing to change about how you are. And I think that's very evident, not to say there isn't a lot of work to do and a lot of conversations to be had, and difficult, angry and emotional ones, but the fact that you're even stepping down, stepping across, for me marks another possibility of change. And all the things that were stated actually in the application, in the job pack, Kat and I really were like, well, they're saying this, so let's see if they will answer to this, which gave us really free rein to go for what we really believed was needed, and to not try and language it in any way that we thought was needed to serve what we understood to be sector or organizational language. So we were very keen to emit certain language from our application, like success, like excellence.
No, very good. No, really good. I mean, I wasn't part of the choice making panel. And one of the things that heartened me is of I think it was 5 who reached the last panel, the depth and the rigor of what each of them wanted to do was extraordinary. And it makes me feel that there's a generation of artists in they all came from Britain. There's a generation there that I am hungry to see at work, and I'm hungry to see what they do. Inevitably, not inevitably. I don't wish to feel guilty about what was not done, but I do wish to feel very positive about what must happen in the future. And I feel very energized by that. And my belief, and I think it is yours, that dance in its essence, in its base terms, in its origins, will give us information, will allow our body minds to be ready and alert to the changes and to the dramas that inevitably are going to enfold us quite quickly. And I believe in this art form as having the capacity to do that. So yes, there have been dance has been in the hands of people who might not have been as alert as they should be to others, but that doesn't take away from the art form itself, doesn't take away from the fact that the art form has, I think, integral to it a study of who and what we are in movement. And there's something profound in that. And
I think it's important to say that that's not to say that what has been established about the art form is the foundational.
No.
That there is so much more to uncover, and there are so many more facets and contours of this art form, and voices to hear, and lived experiences to express through this art form, that we're trying. When I say we, who do I mean here? I think the simplest way is to talk about Kat and I, but I think the we also encompasses anyone that feels invested in dance and movement and the body. So this sense of how do we make space and room to see and hear, and to plant and prepare the soil for new, not yet seen, not yet born practitioners of this, movers, participants of this, because there's a whole uncovered pool of artists, of potential artists, of potential audiences, of potential participants. And we know how many times we're always trying to answer to applications of attracting new audiences, developing new audiences. But why do they always stay the same? Something fundamental isn't changing.
Yeah.
Something fundamental really isn't changing. And I know a lot of colleagues at the moment within the sector are doing a lot of reading and training and forums, roundtables around issues of social justice and racism within dance. And brilliant. And keep doing and keep actioning and keep being with others, not just reading about how to be. Which brings
doing things. That's what you tell me. We must do things. Yes.
We have to keep doing. And I think, well, anyway, we can go on about that. But let's segue now to the doing and how that relates to the physical material of the body. Let's talk a bit about what I know we both value, possibly in very, very different ways, and some aligning ways. But can we talk about the value of the body and movement a bit, and something we both feel very strongly about? And also, can we talk about why dance?
There's I've tried to recapture moments in which I remember being at a threshold, or various thresholds, and some of those thresholds have been when to step into a dance studio, or when to step on stage, or when to step into a new conversation with somebody who doesn't work within my discipline. And one that keeps returning is stepping across the threshold from being outside the dance studio to inside the dance studio, because I don't know why we suddenly should become different the moment we enter into the dance studio. That's not to say anything against dance, but I believe from rising in the morning or from my little granddaughter being born, all the everyday things that happen to us are so bodily, they're so corporeal, we live in sensation, in feeling, in relationship. So one of my thoughts is, when you cross from the everyday into the dance studio, why do you cross into the dance studio, and what is it about dance at that moment that allows you to keep the everyday, that allows to keep that knowledge that you have learnt every second of your lived life? And how do you incorporate that? But what turns it into dance, and what turns the dance that you are doing into your dance, not necessarily somebody else's dance, so that what you are bringing to the studio is your experience, your culture, your background, your gender, your history. I'm going to stop there for a moment because I need to recoup, and you're going to take over for a moment while I recoup.
I was just really enjoying listening there. So I'm not going to respond directly, but I'm going to talk about it myself around the value of the body and movement. And it just feels like even before the pandemic that the body is under threat. And I do believe it is different depending on which country you are in. And my experience of contact and touch and community is very different in Spain, and is very different in Hong Kong as it is in England. But going back to feeling like the body is under threat, of course there is the threat of the virus, but there is this psychological threat that makes us defensive and protective of our bodies in a way that can be very harmful as well as useful. And we talked a bit before, didn't we, Sue, another time about how through moving, through understanding, through attention to the body, through observing, through staying with it, and through actually moving and letting the body move, we become more aware and therefore more in control or more knowledgeable in paying attention to it. Maybe not more in control of it, but more our attention is heightened. And is there a way that we can give more value, more space to what dancers do and movers do, which gives ultimate value to embodiment and presence and communication, relationship, physical relationship, existence and relationship to space and context around? How might we keep giving attention and time to embody so that we can really hold ourselves and move ourselves with agency, so that we don't go into these protective stances, especially with all this physical distancing that is in place and this protection around contaminating others or being contaminated. How might we, through that constant attention and investigation, I don't want to call it training, because that gives unhealthy connotations for many people also as positive ones, but how might we keep that attention so that this agency and this agility and dexterity with our bodies allow us to continue that spontaneity, continue that relationship to others, so that the distancing is not social at all. It is merely spatial, but it's still relational, you know.
We're talking, the two of us. I don't know how many people are watching or listening, and I think it's our big task. It's our big task is because I sense generations and generations of dancers, even those doing works that we may or may not feel comfortable with, or ones that we simply don't know. Generations of dancers have had a relationship to how they are in movement, and it's hard to share verbally. Mm-hmm. So, and it's hard to share verbally when we try and talk about the connectivity of mind and body, because certainly in English, the mind and the body are two separate entities. It's languaged that way. We are educated that way. Our society is built that way. Hence, I feel this sort of physical fear that is amplified in COVID. Yes, we have to be safe, but it seems to be amplified in a way in which maybe dance and dancers can help lead us through the danger on into the other side. And I think that might be one of our tasks. Otherwise, I feel there will be a residue of people not wanting to touch each other or be in each other's company, and I'm sure lots of people do, but I also think there's this nervousness, and I feel that's something possibly in the future that dance can lead us forward and through. And I think this idea of language is somehow going to be important. I believe all of us are in touch with feeling, and quite often we find that feeling very hard to articulate. And yet when we are in that space where it's hard to articulate, something quite precious can be found, something quite articulate can be found there without articulation. And I think dance lives within that space as well. And it can be language, it can be beautifully written about, but it can also be stilled if we go back to the idea of archive, or even in language, the language becomes the archive quicker, not English, quickly, and stultifies our art form, which is in the best way about change. There's a book by Richard Sennett called The Craftsman, and he talks about the repetition of, for instance, slamming an axe into a piece of wood, but no movement is the same because he has to adjust both to the tiredness of his arms, the groove already written into the wood, and his body adjusting to the weight and the drive of his implement. And I think that is movement and change, and it is craft, and it is something being done. And we need to recognize dance not only as an art, but as a knowledge generator, as a method for rigorous attunement, if those of us that want to take it into the profession, and those of us that don't, still a pleasurable play out of something that we are in the process of learning all the time. Where were we? That was exciting getting down there. Somehow I felt excited by this idea that our subject is so much larger than the idea of performance.
Indeed. And I've just had 2 months in Galicia in the north of Spain, and I often think that when I get to swim and walk in that way on different terrain and in different textures, that I need to dance less. But dancing otherwise in an urban environment is my access to nature. And it really helps me to resource myself. And I think a lot of dancers and practitioners can relate to that kind of moving away from their training, denouncing their training, reclaiming their training, and reclaiming their tissues and their bodies and their joints. And it's interesting, as you get older, you're less able to learn steps as quickly or to move as quick, as fast or with the same strength and agility. And there's something you talked about, age and injury, alongside watching May grow, and having recently gone through a pregnancy for me, and the recovery of that. I don't even know whether recovery is the right word, because it is actually just where you're in each moment that you deal with, and you dance with that. And it can be, and I think possibly this can relate to the idea of past, present, future, this legacy, but it's quite damaging to think of the body I had before, and when am I going to get that back, or how do I preserve the idea of that body before. It's much more useful and much more generative to work with the body I have right now.
Yeah.
And throughout the pregnancy, I always thought that getting bigger was going to be the problem, but it never was. That was fine. That was just dealing with another shape. It was all the other shifts that were happening, much more internally, much more structurally, where I couldn't bend down.
See your toes.
Yeah, well, the pelvic floor and the pubic symphysis, and consequently after, as opposed to seeing the body as something to strive for and achieve, or something to recover. How is it something that I really deal with in the moment, and the needs that it needs in the moment? There, of course, is grief and pain with that, but how does that mix with regeneration,
Well, in a sense, trying again to flip aging on its up end is, I am going to try my best to think of it. I don't want to reclaim my 24-year-old body. Of course, secretly I do, but I'm going to try and put that to one side. I want to find out how to claim the future body, in much the same as I don't want to claim the future of dance at all. I just want to witness it, in a way, not be embroiled with it in its depths, because in some ways I need the relief of not being having to be at the organizational coalface anymore. However exciting that has been, I think I can slip my mooring from that and find out what else is possible in the mind body that I have now. And I think I will do some sedentary things like writing, because actually dance has taught me, I feel, how to be a little bit more accurate, I sense the words I'm writing rather than intellectualize them. I sense them, and I feel I sense them with my body. At the moment I'm making a film with many still images, I sense the choreography of these images rather than I intellectualize about them, or I want to explain any of it. I think I sense the idea that I don't have to explain everything, as long as what I am trying to do is the word true is tricky, isn't it? But I'll use it for the moment, is true to the moment I'm in. And I feel it's movement that has gathered me to a particular place of articulacy, whether it's in words or whether it's in action. It's one hell of an art form.
And it feels very new to me.
I think it does. And there's another wonderful British artist I know called Lucy Suggett, and she says she believes it's the art form for the 21st century.
And
beyond. She believes, isn't it? I mean, good for her. I think that's,
for me, it goes beyond the art form, and I think
yes, I think it does,
and it becomes, as I'm sure everything else does, but the life of it, the necessity of it, the politics of it, are so relevant. And we were just speaking earlier, weren't we, about how to really give space and to give attention to the body is very anti-capitalistic, because it goes against that whole shape. And it isn't about a linearity only. It isn't about a goal orientated. It's not about consuming. And it's incredibly transient.
I think it's also in response to, because I think sometimes when we talk about the body, we can be accused of it being insular, and that we are talking about what is happening within our skin. Whereas in fact, I think in some ways the skin has become transparent, and it's our relational capacity, not only to what is within, but our relational capacity to what is without. Deborah Hay, the choreographer, I wish I could remember these words well, but she roughly says, what if the trillions of cells, atoms that you are made out of, both are looking out all around you and gathering in? And when I have the energy to think of the complexity of that, then I am sort of enlivened to the possibility of this constant exchange that we can be part of. And sometimes I wish I'd reached that point so much earlier than I did.
You think then of therapeutic practices and exercises like Tai Chi and Qigong and acupuncture, and how I always think about, well, also relating that to the craniosacral work that I do, how ultimately organal function and integration and communication and relationship emits outward, and the health, as much health and flow that you can achieve within, ultimately emanates out. And it always fascinated me how if something is fixed there, something gets fixed outside. So maybe you no longer forget where your keys are anymore, having been the person that always forgot your keys. But now that your liver is functioning properly, you don't need to forget. So all these funny relationships and threads that we don't make of that internal and external environment, you know.
We don't expand into them. Is that what we don't
relate them?
We limit ourselves. Yes.
Yeah. We don't relate them. Yeah. So I remember a good friend of mine who I used to live with. She was the most chaotic and brilliant person, but her room was immaculate. And I say, how did you keep your rooms? Why do you keep your room so immaculate? She goes, because my brain is impossible. If I don't order my external environment, that internal environment doesn't get to be chaotic, you know. And it was a lovely manifestation of what is within, whereas you think, oh, chaos outside, chaos inside, you know. But I really enjoyed that relationship of inside outside.
Handbag.
Anyway, we're coming to our last minute.
I think we are.
And we will certainly carry on our conversation soon. And
they're enjoyable as conversation is, but also dancing side by side. I'm not quite sure if we will do that, but maybe we will one day.
I think
dancing side by side is fun. That's good.
Me too. So we'll continue our conversations soon, but we'd also like to invite any of you that want to get in touch with us together or individually to continue those conversations with us.
And thank you to FACYL Festival.
Muchas gracias.
Quando me laças